The text message glowed on my phone screen like a bad omen. Tabitha, we need to talk. The family business is in trouble. My brother Riley's number, one I hadn't seen in 8 years. I'm Tabitha, and the last time I saw my family, I was being thrown out of our mansion for choosing love over legacy. The memory still burns fresh. My father's face turning purple with rage, my mother's ice-cold stare, and my brothers standing like statues in the background while I packed my bags. Everything okay? Alex's voice pulled me from the memory. He was wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag, his coveralls bearing our company logo. Wagner Auto Care, women-led, customer first. Riley just texted, I said, showing him the phone. Apparently, the mighty Taylor empire is crumbling. Alex's eyebrows shot up. After 8 years of radio silence? Karma's a funny thing, isn't it? I set my phone face down on my desk, trying to focus on the stack of invoices before me, but my hands were shaking. Want to talk about it? Alex pulled up a chair, his presence as steady and reassuring as it had been that night I chose him over my inheritance. Remember when my father called you grease monkey trash? I laughed, but it came out hollow. Now look at us, 20 locations across the state and every single one profitable. Thanks to you. Alex squeezed my hand. You turned one rundown garage into something amazing. The door burst open, and Amelia, my business partner, strode in waving a tablet. Have you seen the news? Taylor Industries is facing federal investigation for fraud. It's all over the financial sites. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and started Googling. Headlines screamed about suspicious accounting practices, insider trading allegations, and potential bankruptcy. Photos showed my father leaving the federal building, looking older and smaller than I remembered. Holy shit, I whispered. Your father's company? Sophia, our head mechanic, appeared in the doorway. The one who said women don't belong in the automotive industry? I nodded, remembering his words when I first mentioned learning about cars. That's beneath us, Tabitha. Know your place. Well, Sophia crossed her arms. Looks like he should have listened to his daughter after all. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Nicholas, my older brother. Mom and Dad are asking for you. Please call. What are you thinking? Alex asked softly. I stood up, pacing the office. 8 years ago, I begged them to accept you, to see that I could make my own choices. Mom said I was throwing away everything they'd built for me. Dad said I was dead to them. My voice cracked. Now they need me? Amelia perched on my desk. Whatever you decide, we've got your back. Remember that night? I turned to Alex. When I showed up at your apartment with 2 suitcases and tears streaming down my face? He smiled. You said, I choose you and I don't regret it. I still don't. I touched the simple wedding band on my finger. We built this from nothing. No family connections, no inherited wealth. Just hard work and believing in ourselves. Sophia snorted. And proving every man wrong who said women can't run auto shops. My phone kept buzzing. More messages from Riley, Nicholas, even one from my mother. Each one more desperate than the last. You know what's funny? I picked up a framed photo from my desk, our first shop's grand opening. They thought I was throwing my life away, but I've never felt more alive than when I'm here, proving them wrong every single day. So what's the plan, boss? Amelia asked. I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. They want to talk? Fine, but this time it's on my terms. I started typing a response to Riley. Meet me at Wagner Auto Care tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. Bring them all. You sure about this? Alex's concern was evident. I looked around my office at the awards on the wall, the photos of our growing business, the faces of the women we'd trained and employed. They took everything from me once, thinking I'd come crawling back. Instead, I built something better. I smiled, feeling stronger than I had in years. Now they're the ones crawling back. Want me to accidentally spill some oil on their fancy shoes? Sophia grinned wickedly. We all laughed, breaking the tension. But as my team filed out, leaving me alone with Alex, I felt the weight of tomorrow settling on my shoulders. "Whatever happens," Alex said, pulling me into a hug, "remember that choosing love wasn't your weakness. It was your strength." I nodded against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of motor oil and coffee. Tomorrow I'd face my past. But this time, I wasn't the powerless daughter they'd cast aside. I was Tabitha Wagner, and I'd built an empire of my own, one that actually made a difference in people's lives. My phone buzzed one final time. Riley again. "We'll be there. Thank you, Tabs." I turned off my phone and took Alex's hand. "Let's go home. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." They arrived in a Mercedes, still clinging to appearances despite everything. I watched through my office window as they stepped out, looking like poorly cast versions of their former selves. My father's suit hung loose on his frame, my mother's designer heels scuffed at the edges. Riley and Nicholas followed, both wearing the haunted expressions of men who hadn't slept in weeks. "Ready?" Alex squeezed my shoulder. "As I'll ever be." I straightened my Wagner Auto Care polo shirt, worn deliberately instead of my usual business attire. Amelia met them at the entrance. I heard her voice carrying through the hallway. "Please wait in the conference room. Tabitha will be with you shortly." I gave them 10 minutes. Let them sit there, surrounded by photos of our successful business launches, awards, and newspaper features about our women's mentorship program. When I finally walked in, my mother gasped. Maybe she expected to see the polished debutante they'd raised. Instead, she got me. Confident, successful, and completely independent of their world. "Tabitha." My father stood, extending his hand. "You look, well." I didn't take it. "Let's skip the pleasantries. You're here because you need something." "Always direct," Nicholas muttered. "Some things never change. The business is failing." Riley cut in, ever the practical one. "We're facing criminal charges, frozen assets, and—" "I've seen the news," I interrupted, sitting at the head of the table. "What I don't understand is why you're here." My mother's perfectly manicured hands trembled as she clutched her designer purse. "We need help, darling. Your father's reputation." "My father's reputation?" I laughed. "The same reputation he used to justify disowning me?" "We made mistakes." My father's voice cracked. "Terrible mistakes. With you, with the business." "Save it." I held up my hand. "What exactly do you want from me?" They exchanged glances before Riley spoke. "Your business is thriving. We need employment, references, something to show the courts we're making amends." "You want jobs?" I leaned forward. "Here?" "It's beneath us," my mother blurted, then quickly covered her mouth. "Kendall," my father snapped. "No, let her finish," I said coldly. "What exactly is beneath you, Mother? Honest work? Or working for your daughter?" Silence filled the room. Through the conference room windows, I could see Sophia teaching a young female apprentice how to diagnose an engine problem. The pride on both their faces said everything about what we'd built here. "We're desperate," Nicholas admitted. "Everything's gone. The houses, the cars, the connections. Nobody will touch us. Karma's fascinating, isn't it?" I stood walking to the window. 8 years ago, you told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. That marrying a mechanic would lead to nothing but poverty and regret. "We were wrong," Riley said softly. "Look at what you've built." I turned back to them. "You want jobs? Fine. But here's my condition. You start at the bottom, all of you." "What do you mean?" My father's face reddened. "Dad, you'll work in customer service. Mom, you'll be a receptionist. Nicholas and Riley, you'll train as entry-level mechanics under Sophia." "This is absurd." My mother stood up. "We're not some common. Take it or leave it." I cut her off. "You'll earn minimum wage, follow all company policies, and most importantly, you'll report to women in leadership positions." "You're enjoying this?" Nicholas accused. "No." I met his gaze. "I'm offering you what you never gave me. A chance to prove yourselves through hard work rather than privilege. My father stood slowly, his shoulders sagging. When do we start? Robert. My mother grabbed his arm. You can't be serious. We don't have a choice, Kendall, he said quietly. Our accounts are frozen. The lawyers need to be paid. We need income. Any income. I pulled out 4 employee handbooks from my briefcase. Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Dress code is in the handbook. And just so we're clear, 1 hint of undermining my business, 1 complaint about taking orders from women, and you're out. Riley took the handbooks, distributing them silently. One more thing, I added as they stood to leave. The name Taylor doesn't exist here. You're Robert, Kendall, Nicholas, and Riley. Nothing more. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she clutched her handbook. Is this revenge, Tabitha? No, Mother. This is opportunity. The same kind you denied me. The difference is, I'm actually giving you a choice. They filed out slowly, defeated but desperate enough to accept my terms. As the door closed behind them, Alex and Amelia slipped in. That was intense. Amelia whistled low. You okay? Alex asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. I watched through the window as my family climbed back into their Mercedes, probably one of the last remnants of their former life. You know what's strange? I leaned into Alex's embrace. I thought seeing them brought low would feel better. But all I feel is empty. I turned to Amelia. Keep an eye on them when they start. Something tells me this isn't over. You think they're planning something? She asked. I remembered the calculating look in my father's eyes as he accepted my terms. I think they're desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. Their first week was exactly the train wreck I expected. I watched from my office as my father fumbled through customer interactions, his face reddening each time he had to say, "Let me check with my supervisor." My mother's perfectly manicured nails clicked against the keyboard as she struggled with our scheduling software, each mistake making her jump when Sophia barked corrections from across the shop. But it was the scene unfolding in the garage that drew my attention now. That's not how you hold a wrench. Sophia's voice carried through the open bay doors. Nicholas stood beside a lifted Honda, his once immaculate suit replaced by navy coveralls, looking utterly lost. I know what I'm doing, he snapped, then immediately dropped the wrench on his foot. Sophia crossed her arms. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a toddler playing mechanic. I stepped closer, pretending to review paperwork while eavesdropping. This is ridiculous, Nicholas muttered. I have an MBA from... Your MBA won't fix this timing belt. Sophia cut him off. Now, watch carefully. This is the 3rd time I'm showing you. Riley, surprisingly, was doing better. He actually seemed interested in learning, asking questions and taking notes. It reminded me of when we were kids, before our parents' expectations crushed his natural curiosity. Quite a sight, isn't it? Amelia appeared beside me, coffee in hand. Like watching aliens try to blend in with humans, I agreed. A crash from the front office interrupted us. My mother had knocked over a display of air fresheners, and instead of picking them up, she was having what looked like a full meltdown. I can't do this anymore, she cried, mascara running down her cheeks. I used to run charity galas, for God's sake. I started toward her, but Riley got there first. Mom, come on, let's get some air. He led her outside, and something in their body language made me follow at a distance. They didn't notice me standing just around the corner of the building. I know it's hard, Riley was saying, but we don't have a choice. Your father's pride will be the death of me, my mother sobbed. First the illegal trading, then the covered-up losses, and now this humiliation. I froze. Illegal trading? Covered-up losses? Mom, keep your voice down, Riley hissed. Nobody can know about that. Why not? Everyone knows everything else. Our friends, our colleagues, they're all laughing at us. And now my own daughter has turned me into a common receptionist. Better than prison, Riley muttered. My mother's voice turned sharp. What did you say? Nothing. Riley sighed. let's get back inside before… Before what? I stepped around the corner, making them both jump. Before I hear something I'm not supposed to? My mother straightened, quickly wiping her eyes. Tabitha, Save it. I held up my hand. Riley, what did you mean about prison? He looked away. It's complicated. Uncomplicate it. Tabitha. My father's voice boomed from behind me. He'd followed us out. This is none of your concern. It became my concern when you showed up begging for jobs. I turned to face him. What exactly are you hiding? Robert, my mother warned, but he was already advancing toward me, finger pointed. You think you can interrogate us just because we're working in your little garage? You're still my daughter, and you will show some respect. I didn't back down. Respect? Like the respect you showed me when you threw me out? Or the respect you're showing now by hiding whatever illegal mess you've created? You have no idea what pressures I was under, he shouted. The market was crashing, investors were pulling out. Dad, stop. Riley grabbed his arm, but the damage was done. I saw it in their faces. There was way more to their downfall than what had made the news. Get back to work, I said coldly. All of you. But this conversation isn't over. As they filed back inside, Amelia appeared at my side. I recorded everything, she whispered, showing me her phone. Been keeping an eye on them since they started acting sketchy yesterday. Send it to my email, I replied quietly. And call Marcus. Your lawyer? You think it's that serious? I watched through the window as my family resumed their positions. My father with his forced smile at customers, my mother's shaking hands at the computer, my brothers under Sophia's stern supervision. They're hiding something big, I said. Something that could explain why they're really here. You think they're trying to use your business as cover? I don't know. I pulled out my phone, already drafting an email to Marcus. But I'm going to find out. In the meantime, watch them like a hawk. Record everything suspicious. What about Sophia? Should we tell her? I thought about my head mechanic's sharp eyes and sharper tongue. No. Let her keep teaching them. The more they struggle with honest work, the more likely they are to slip up and reveal what they're hiding. And if they do, I watched my father fumble another customer interaction, his facade of humility cracking just slightly. Then they'll learn what real consequences feel like. We need to talk. Riley cornered me in the supply room after hours, his voice barely above a whisper. Not here. Not with them around. I checked my watch. Everyone else had left except Alex, who was finishing paperwork in our office. Fine. 5 minutes. We walked to the small courtyard behind the shop. The setting sun cast long shadows across the concrete, and the air still smelled of motor oil and rubber. Dad's been making phone calls during his breaks, Riley said, pacing, to someone named Marcus. My stomach dropped. Marcus, my lawyer. How do you know? I overheard him yesterday. He was asking about business registration documents, ownership structures. Riley ran a hand through his hair. Tabs, I think he's trying to find a way to take control of your business. He can't, I said firmly, but my hands were shaking. The business is ironclad. Alex and I made sure… Dad always finds a way, Riley interrupted. Just like he found ways to cook the books at Taylor Industries, to hide losses, to… He trailed off. To what, Riley? He pulled out his phone, showed me a series of emails. These are from 6 months ago. Dad was desperate. The company was hemorrhaging money, so he started moving funds between accounts. Client money, investment funds, even Mom's trust fund. Jesus Christ. I scrolled through the emails, each one more damning than the last. Why are you showing me this? Because I can't take it anymore. Riley's voice cracked. The lying, the scheming. Do you know what it was like watching him destroy everything? Watching him drag Nicholas into it? Nicholas knows? Nicholas helped. Riley laughed bitterly. Good old Nicholas, always trying to be just like Dad. A noise from inside the shop made us both jump. Alex appeared in the doorway. Everything okay out here? I quickly handed Riley's phone back. Just catching up. Alex's eyes narrowed. He knew me too well to buy that. Your father's still here. Saw him making calls in his car. Riley tensed. I should go. Wait. I grabbed his arm. Why now? Why tell me this? He looked at me, and for a moment I saw the brother I used to know. The one who'd sneak me candy when I was sad, who taught me to ride a bike when Dad was too busy. Because you got out, he said softly. You chose love over money, and look what you built. Meanwhile, I chose money over everything, and all it got me was... He gestured to his grease-stained coveralls. Riley. Our father's voice boomed from inside. Where are you? Don't tell him what I showed you, Riley whispered urgently. There you are. Our father appeared in the doorway, his fake customer service smile dropping instantly. What's going on here? Just smoking. Riley lied smoothly, pulling out a cigarette pack. With your sister? Dad's eyes darted between us suspiciously. Is that a problem? I challenged. Of course not. His smile returned, false as ever. But it's late. We should go, Riley. As they left, Alex wrapped an arm around my waist. Want to tell me what that was really about? I waited until I heard their car start up and drive away. Pull up the security cameras from today. Focus on my father's brakes. I need to see who he's been calling. 20 minutes later, we had our answer. The footage clearly showed him accessing the business's Wi-Fi, looking up legal documents on his phone. He's planning something, Alex said, rewinding the footage again. No, I corrected. He's already planned it. This is just him setting it in motion. I pulled out my own phone, dialed Marcus. Tabitha? My lawyer answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you. Your father reached out to my office today. What did he want? Information about your business structure. Said he was your father and had investing interests. I gripped the phone tighter. And I told him to go through proper channels. But Tabitha, he mentioned something about original funding sources. Said he had proof of family money being used for initial startup. That's a lie. Alex cut in, loud enough for Marcus to hear. We built this from scratch. My savings, Tabitha's side jobs. I know, Marcus replied. But he's building a case, and given his background in corporate law, he's trying to claim ownership. I finished. Or at least enough of a stake to gain control. Exactly. And Tabitha? He's not working alone. I've had calls from 3 other lawyers today, all asking similar questions. I thought of Nicholas, of my mother's tears, of Riley's warnings. How do we stop this? Keep everything documented. Every interaction, every conversation. And Tabitha? Be careful. Men like your father, when they're desperate. I know. I ended the call, turned to Alex. We need to call an emergency meeting. Amelia, Sophia, everyone. First thing tomorrow. What are you thinking? I looked at the security footage still playing on the screen, at my father's familiar scheming expression. I'm thinking it's time to remind them who they're dealing with. They want to play dirty? Fine. But this time, I'm ready for them. The early morning meeting was tense. I'd gathered everyone in the conference room before my family was due to arrive, laying out what we'd discovered. That sneaky bastard, Sophia growled, cracking her knuckles. Want me to accidentally drop a transmission on his foot? No violence, I said, though the idea was tempting. We need to be smarter than that. Amelia spread printouts across the table. Security footage stills, email records, phone logs. Your father's been accessing our network, sending documents to external emails. Can we fire them? One of our junior mechanics asked. I mean, this has to violate employment terms. Not yet, I replied. We need more evidence, something concrete that proves... The door burst open. My mother stood there, mascara streaked down her face. Tabitha, please, I need to talk to you. I nodded to the others. Give us a minute. As they filed out, my mother collapsed into a chair, her designer purse hitting the floor. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending. Pretending what? That this is about jobs, about redemption. She pulled out a handkerchief, dabbed at her eyes. Your father, he's planning to take everything from you, just like he took everything from me. I sat down slowly. What do you mean? Before I married him, I had dreams. I was going to open my own fashion house. I had designs, connections, even investors lined up. She laughed bitterly. But your father convinced me to invest it all in his company instead. Said it was safer, smarter. And you did it? I was young and in love. She met my eyes. Just like you were with Alex. The difference is you stood your ground. I gave in. Why are you telling me this now? Because history's repeating itself. She reached into her purse, pulled out a USB drive. Everything's here. The fraud, the embezzlement, the real reason we lost everything. Your father didn't just make bad investments. He stole from his own clients. I stared at the drive. And Nicholas helped him. Nicholas worshipped him. Still does. She pushed the drive across the table. Riley tried to stop it, Threatened to go to the authorities. That's when your father promoted him, gave him a bigger stake, bought his silence. And you? Where were you in all this? Hosting charity galas, she said bitterly. Playing the perfect wife while my dreams collected dust in a storage unit. She stood up suddenly. I should go, if your father knows I gave you this. Mom, wait. I grabbed her hand. Why now? Why help me? She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in years, I saw real emotion in her eyes. Because watching you build this place, seeing how you inspire these women, it reminded me of who I used to be, before I let your father crush my spirit. The front door chimed. The others were arriving for work. Don't tell them I was here, my mother whispered, heading for the back exit. And Tabitha? Be careful. Your father's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous, I finished. I know. After she left, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. Files upon files appeared. Financial records, emails, voice recordings. Everything we needed to prove what they'd done. Alex found me still staring at the screen 20 minutes later. Hey, your family's here, and what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I showed him what I'd found. His face darkened as he read. This is bigger than trying to steal your business, he said finally. This is criminal. I know. I closed the laptop. Get Amelia and Sophia. Tell them to watch my father and Nicholas carefully today. Record everything. What about your mom and Riley? I thought about my mother's tears, Riley's warnings. They might be our allies in this, but first, I pulled out my phone, dialed Marcus again. Tabitha, it's early. How quickly can you get here? I have something you need to see. Give me an hour. I ended the call, stood up, straightened my shirt. Through the window, I could see my father and Nicholas arriving, heads together, probably plotting their next move. What are you going to do? Alex asked. First, I'm going to act normal. Let them think their plan is working. I smiled grimly. Then, when Marcus gets here, we're going to show them exactly what happens when you try to steal from me. And your mom? Riley? I touched the USB drive in my pocket. They made their choice. Now it's time to make mine. Walking out into the shop, I passed my mother at the reception desk. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me the smallest of nods. Good morning, everyone, I called out, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. Let's get to work. My father smiled his fake smile, but I saw the predator behind it. That was fine. He thought I was still his little girl, easy to manipulate and control. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Marcus arrived with 2 federal agents, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the shop. I watched through my office window as my father's face drained of color when they walked in. What's the meaning of this? He demanded, abandoning his customer service post. Robert. Marcus nodded coolly. Perhaps we should take this conversation somewhere private. I led them to the conference room where Amelia had already set up a laptop displaying the evidence. My mother and Riley slipped in behind us, while Nicholas stood frozen in the doorway, still holding a wrench. Come in, Nicholas, I said. You'll want to hear this too. The federal agents introduced themselves, Weber and Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. They'd apparently been building a case against Taylor Industries for months. We have some questions about certain financial transactions. Agent Weber began, laying out documents that looked eerily similar to what my mother had provided. I don't have to answer anything without my lawyer. My father blustered, but his hands were shaking. Actually, Marcus interjected, given that you've been attempting to fraudulently claim ownership of this business, I think you'll want to cooperate. Nicholas stepped forward. Whatever you think you know, we know everything. I cut in, turning the laptop around. The embezzlement, the client fraud, how you used Mom's trust fund to cover your tracks. My father's face turned purple. You! He whirled on my mother. You did this. No, Robert. She stood straighter, her voice steady. You did this. All of it. I just finally stopped covering for you. Mrs. Taylor has already provided a full statement, Agent Rodriguez said, making notes. As has your son, Riley. Nicholas staggered back. Riley, you betrayed us? I chose truth over family loyalty. Riley met his brother's eyes. Something I should have done years ago. My father lunged for the laptop, but Agent Weber caught his arm. Sir, please don't make this worse for yourself. Worse? He laughed manically. My own daughter, my wife, my son, all conspiring against me. How could it be worse? You could go to prison for 20 years instead of 5, Agent Rodriguez said calmly. Cooperation tends to look good to judges. I watched my father deflate, decades of arrogance crumbling in minutes. Nicholas sank into a chair, head in his hands. What happens now? My mother asked quietly. Now. Agent Weber pulled out handcuffs. Robert and Nicholas will come with us to answer some questions. The rest of you should expect to be called as witnesses. As they led my father and brother out, customers and employees stared. Sophia appeared at my side, arms crossed. Want me to handle damage control? I nodded, grateful for her support. Tell everyone we'll have a full staff meeting tomorrow morning. Once the federal agents left, Riley turned to me. I'm sorry, Tabs. For everything. For not standing up to him sooner. You did it now, I said. That counts for something. My mother touched my arm hesitantly. What about us? Our jobs here? I looked at Alex and Amelia, who both nodded slightly. You can stay, both of you. But things will be different now. Different how? Riley asked. No more lies, no more schemes. You'll work honest jobs, learn real skills, and maybe... I took a deep breath. Maybe we can start rebuilding something real this time. I'd like that, my mother whispered. And Tabitha? That storage unit I mentioned? With my old designs? It's still there. I've kept paying for it all these years. Maybe it's time to dust them off, I suggested. We could use a proper uniform supplier for the shops. Her eyes lit up for the first time in years. After they left to process everything, Alex pulled me into his arms. You okay? No, I admitted. But I will be. I looked around our shop, the business we'd built from nothing, the dream we'd fought for. You know what's funny? All those years I thought they were so powerful, so untouchable. And now? Now I see they were just scared people making desperate choices. I pulled out my phone, showing him a text from Agent Weber. Your father's already talking. Looks like a plea deal in the works. Think they'll actually change? Alex asked. Mom and Riley? Maybe. They seem genuinely ready to try. I watched through the window as they walked to their car. No more Mercedes, just a used Honda Riley had bought with his first real paycheck from us. And you? Are you ready to try with them? I thought about my mother's hidden dreams, Riley's quiet resistance, how they'd both finally chosen truth over facade. Yeah, I said slowly. I think I am. Not for who they were, but for who they might become. Sophia poked her head in. Boss? Customers are asking questions about the police. Tell them the truth. I decided. That we discovered fraud and reported it. That we believe in doing the right thing, even when it's hard. She grinned. Now that's the kind of leadership speech I like. As she left, Alex squeezed my hand. Proud of you, you know that? I squeezed back, watching our employees return to work, our business continuing despite the morning's drama. I'm proud of us. All of us. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when we arrived for the sentencing. 3 months had passed since that morning in the shop, and everything had changed. Ms. Wagner. They thrust microphones toward me. How does it feel to be the whistleblower in your own family scandal? I pushed through with Alex at my side, Riley and my mother following close behind. Inside, the marble halls echoed with whispers and footsteps. Ready for this? Alex squeezed my hand. Before I could answer, Nicholas appeared with his lawyer. He'd lost weight in custody, his designer suit replaced by department store clearance. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. Tabitha. His voice was barely audible. Can we talk, please? Riley stepped forward protectively, but I nodded. 5 minutes. We moved to a quiet corner while the others took their seats in the courtroom. Dad took a plea deal, Nicholas said, running a hand through his unkempt hair. 15 years, eligible for parole in 8. I know, the prosecutors told me. He wanted me to take one too. Nicholas laughed bitterly. Said it would look better if we both showed remorse. And I told him no. He met my eyes. I'm pleading guilty, but I'm telling everything. Every scheme, every lie, every client we betrayed. No deals. I studied his face, searching for the brother I once knew. Why? Because you were right. His voice cracked. About everything. The way Dad raised us, the values he taught us, it was all poison. I see that now. The bailiff called for everyone to enter the courtroom. Nicholas? I caught his arm. How long are you looking at? With full cooperation? 5 to 7 years. He attempted a smile. Plenty of time to think about who I want to be when I get out. Inside, my father sat at the defendant's table, shoulders slumped. He didn't look at any of us as we filed into our seats. The judge entered and the proceedings began. I half listened as lawyers presented final statements, as my father made a tearful plea for leniency that sounded as fake as his customer service smile. Then it was my turn to speak. Ms. Wagner. The judge nodded. As both victim and whistleblower, you have the right to make a statement. I stood, feeling every eye in the courtroom. 8 years ago, my father disowned me for choosing love over money. He said I was throwing my life away by marrying a mechanic and walking away from the family business. My father flinched. What I actually walked away from was a legacy of lies. While I built something real, a business that helps people, that creates opportunities, that values honesty, he was destroying lives with fraud and theft. I turned to face him directly. You taught us that image was everything. That success meant having the biggest house, the most expensive car, the right connections. But sitting here today, I'm successful because I rejected everything you stood for. The judge leaned forward. And what would you like to see happen here today? Justice, I said simply. Not revenge, not punishment, but real justice. For the clients who lost their savings, for the employees who lost their jobs, and for the family members who lost their way trying to please you. After I sat down, my mother squeezed my hand, tears rolling down her cheeks. The sentencing was swift. 15 years for my father. Nicholas received 6 years with the possibility of early release for cooperation. As they led them away, my father finally looked at me. Tabitha, he called out. I'm sorry, for everything. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late. Outside, the reporters were waiting again, but this time I was ready. Ms. Wagner, will you make a statement? Yes. I stepped up to the microphones, Alex, Riley, and my mother flanking me. Today isn't about family drama or corporate scandal. It's about choosing right over wrong, truth over lies, and integrity over image. What's next for Wagner Auto Care? I smiled, glancing at my mother. We're expanding. Adding a line of custom workwear designed specifically for women in trades, actually. Turns out my mother's forgotten dreams fit perfectly with our mission. And your brother's? One's paying for his mistakes. The other, I squeezed Riley's shoulder, is learning to be the man he always wanted to be. Later that evening, back at the shop, Sophia raised a coffee mug and toast. To justice served. To new beginnings, my mother added, spreading design sketches across the break room table. To family, Riley said quietly. The kind we choose to be. I looked around at these people. My husband, my reformed mother, my changed brother, my loyal employees. This was real success. Not the mansion I grew up in or the trust fund I lost, but this moment, this truth, this hard-won peace. To us, I said, raising my mug. All of us. And in that fluorescent-lit break room, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and coffee, I felt something I'd never felt in all my years in that massive family estate. I felt home. The bell above the shop door chimed as a young woman in a business suit walked in, clutching a newspaper. I recognized that lost look, that desperate hope in her eyes. Can I help you? I asked, setting down my coffee. I read about you, she said, unfolding the article. About standing up to your family, building your own business. She took a deep breath. My father wants me to take over his law firm, but I want to open a bakery. Everyone says I'm crazy. Before I could respond, my mother emerged from her new design studio in the back. You're not crazy, she said, smoothing her work apron. You're brave. The woman blinked, recognizing her. You're Kendall from the article. I am. My mother smiled. And I spent 30 years regretting not following my dreams. Now I design workwear for women in trades, and every morning I wake up excited to come here. The door chimed again. Riley walked in with Sophia, both covered in grease from teaching a women's auto repair workshop. Another successful class, Sophia announced. 3 of them already applied for apprenticeships. The young woman watched them, then turned back to me. How did you do it? How did you find the courage? Come with me. I led her through the shop, past mechanics working on cars, past my mother's studio where prototype uniforms hung on racks. See all this? It started with one choice. Choosing to be true to myself instead of living someone else's dream. But the cost was worth it. I finished. Look around. We employ 50 people across 3 locations. My mother finally pursued her passion for design. My brother discovered he loves teaching mechanics. Even my father and Nicholas. I paused. Well, they're learning hard lessons about what really matters. Alex appeared from under a lifted truck. Babe, that supplier called. They want to expand our partnership to the East Coast. The young woman's eyes widened. You're expanding? We are. I turned to her. What's your name? Sarah. Well, Sarah, want to know the secret to success? It's not about having the most expensive degree or following the safe path. It's about building something real. Something that matters. Like fresh bread? She smiled hesitantly. Exactly like fresh bread. I grabbed a business card. This is my lawyer, Marcus. He helped me set up my business legally, protected my interests. Call him. After Sarah left, clutching the card like a lifeline, Amelia joined us. Reminds me of someone I know. She's got that same fire. My mother agreed, pinning a new design to her board. Riley wiped his hands on a shop rag. Speaking of fire, Nicholas wrote again. He's taking business ethics classes in prison, wants to teach them when he gets out. And Dad? I asked quietly. Still not accepting calls. Riley shrugged. Some people never change. But we did. My mother said softly. We're still changing. Sophia called out from the garage. Boss, that reporter's here for the interview about women in automotive. Coming. I turned to my family. The one I'd chosen. The one I'd rebuilt. Ready to show them what real success looks like? The interview went viral. Not because of our family drama, but because of what we'd built from its ashes. Women across the country started reaching out. asking about apprenticeships, about starting their own businesses. That evening, as we closed up shop, Sarah returned with a box of fresh pastries. "I quit my law internship," she announced, "and I brought samples of why." We gathered in the break room, mechanics, designers, family, passing around incredible croissants and danishes. "You know," Alex said, wrapping an arm around my waist, "the building next door is for rent. Would make a great bakery location." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," I confirmed. "And we happen to know a great lawyer who can help with the paperwork." As everyone chatted and planned, I stepped back and watched. This was what winning looked like. Not destroying my father's empire, but building something better. Something that helped others find their courage, their voice, their path. My phone buzzed. A text from Nicholas. "Proud of you, sis. Keep changing lives." I typed back. "Keep changing yours." "Hey," Alex called. "Sarah wants to know if we'll help her renovate the space." I looked around at my unlikely family. Sophia teaching Riley the proper way to eat a croissant. My mother sketching designs for bakers' uniforms. Amelia already drawing up partnership possibilities. "Of course we'll help," I said. "That's what family does." And there it was. The real victory. Not in revenge or retribution, but in breaking cycles. In helping others break free too. In building something so strong, so true, that it rippled out beyond us, creating change we never imagined. To new beginnings. Sarah raised her coffee cup. "No," I corrected gently. "To being brave enough to make them happen." We all raised our cups, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and motor oil, of dreams both old and new, of courage found and freedom earned. This was my empire, and it was built on love.
In the bustling kitchen, as I washed dishes with my hands submerged in soapy water, Jacob's demand for tea cut through the noise sharply. "Hold on, I'm cleaning up," I replied, trying to convey patience. However, his response was laced with disbelief and urgency, pressing me to prioritize his request over the task at hand. Before I could protest, my mother-in-law, Mrs. Samantha, chimed in from the living room, requesting sweet coffee instead of tea, her tone equally demanding. Surrounded by an unfinished mountain of dishes, I felt overwhelmed by their commands. My name is Kinsley, a 26-year-old working mother caught in a challenging domestic situation. Marrying Jacob at 20, I envisioned a life filled with love and partnership, but reality painted a different picture. Living under the same roof as Jacob's domineering mother, following the passing of his father, I initially empathized with her loss. However, it soon became apparent that I was merely a tool in her manipulative control, expected to manage endless chores, work, and meet their unappreciative demands. Despite my efforts to maintain peace and fulfill my responsibilities, my work was either ignored or criticized. My attempts at cooking were met with disdain, and any attempt at dialogue was shut down with harsh rebukes. The dynamic in our home grew increasingly oppressive, with my presence barely acknowledged, turning my existence into a silent struggle for recognition and respect. In this environment, my 4-year-old son was my only solace, a beacon of happiness in an otherwise dim reality. Our living arrangement, a decision not of my making but imposed upon me, became a constant reminder of my constrained autonomy. As days passed, the harshness escalated, leaving me to navigate a life that felt less like a partnership and more like a solitary confinement within my own home. My existence, once slightly overlooked, had become entirely invisible over the years. As time marched on, Jacob and I aged into our early 30s. Our son matured, yet the heavy, unyielding atmosphere of our home remained static. My mother-in-law, now 66, seemed to find a twisted satisfaction in my discomfort. One weary evening, after a long day at work, it hit me hard. In their eyes, my presence was pointless. I was like a shadow, unseen and unheard, with the sole exception being the loving recognition from my son. The mere thought of losing this one connection was unbearable. Arriving home, I delved into cooking, attempting to dispel the heavy air with the aroma of mapo tofu, fried chicken, and a stir-fry of bell peppers and pork, hoping to inject a touch of normalcy into our dinner. But when Jacob coldly demanded the mayonnaise, offering no thanks or conversation, something in me snapped. It was a small request, yet it marked the breaking point of my patience. The situation deteriorated further when Mrs. Samantha, with a venomous tone, demanded I clean the bathroom right in the middle of dinner. My frustration boiled over at her inappropriate comment, leading to a heated argument. Jacob sided with his mother, insisting I apologize. For the first time in years, I stood my ground, refusing to back down. That night was pivotal. In the solitude of my room, my resolve solidified. I downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and presented them to Jacob, my decision clear. His shock was evident, but I felt a calm determination. Announcing my intention to file for divorce, I finally felt as if I was stepping out from the shadows, ready to reclaim my life. The days that followed were filled with tension, cold stares, and sharp words, yet amidst the turmoil, I discovered a newfound sense of freedom. Serving dinner one evening, despite the storm of glares from Mrs. Samantha, I realized I had begun a journey towards liberation and self-discovery, determined to build a happier, healthier future for myself and my son. As I served the meal, Mrs. Samantha criticized it harshly, claiming even a child could do better. I focused on my son's joyful expression, encouraging him to enjoy his favorite dish, despite Jacob's sarcastic remarks about my efforts to be a good mother. Their disdain was palpable, but I maintained my calm, emphasizing that I was simply trying to provide a pleasant dinner for our son. Mrs. Samantha's dismissal of me as a burden only added to the already tense atmosphere. Jacob's taunts grew more personal, questioning my ability to manage on my own post-divorce. I met his gaze firmly, reminding him of my role as the family's breadwinner and my confidence in caring for myself and our son. His smugness waned, replaced by a hint of doubt. Mrs. Samantha's interjection, underestimating my independence, led the discussion to our financial contributions, a subject they usually avoided. I pointed out the household's reliance on my income, a fact that seemed to unsettle them, especially as Mrs. Samantha claimed they could manage without my pity money. Jacob's silence, however, revealed his awareness of our precarious financial situation without my support. In the days that followed, their behavior swung wildly. Mrs. Samantha alternated between sweet-talking attempts to persuade me to stay and launching insults when her efforts failed. Jacob appeared increasingly unsettled, his confidence waning as the impact of losing my financial support became clear. One day, I accidentally overheard a disturbing plan between them. Jacob expressed panic over losing my financial contribution, to which Mrs. Samantha coldly assured him she had a scheme to make my life unbearable, ensuring I wouldn't leave. Realizing their willingness to manipulate and control to maintain their lifestyle was a jarring wake-up call, confirming the necessity of my decision to seek a better life away from their toxicity. Their indifference towards me and even our son was clear. Their motivations were rooted in control and financial gain. That night, as I lay in bed, a determined plan started to take shape in my mind. I resolved to confront them, not with words or petty squabbles, but in a way that would strike at the core of their pride and financial security. The following morning, I took the first step in my strategy. I reached out to a highly recommended lawyer known for her astuteness and determination. "I'm seeking a divorce, and I intend to ensure they receive not a dime more than what's fair," I explained to her. Her response, full of resolve, reassured me that we would leverage my role as the family's primary provider to our advantage. With each day, my determination only intensified. I began to meticulously document every instance of disrespect, financial exploitation, and even the minor grievances. It was time to flip the script, to make them accountable for their actions. As I compiled evidence for my case, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. For the first time in years, I was steering the course of my future. The gloom that had enveloped me was gradually being replaced by the light of a new beginning. As the divorce proceedings got underway, the household's atmosphere turned even more sour. However, my apprehension was slowly replaced by a firm resolve. One evening, Mrs. Samantha attempted to sway me with feigned concern, suggesting we abandon the divorce and reminding me of our family's ties. Her insincerity was palpable. Facing her, my response was steadfast. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you have treated me," I stated. Jacob, who had been silently observing, accused me of playing the victim. My reply was calm yet firm. I refused to be their scapegoat any longer. The conversation inevitably shifted to finances, with Jacob questioning my ability to support our son alone. I couldn't help but smile confidently, reminding them of my long-standing role as the family's main supporter. Mrs. Samantha's scorn was evident, yet her words no longer held any sway over me. I was aware of my value and the truth of my situation. Meeting with my lawyer again, we refined our strategy. She outlined our approach clearly, ensuring that we were prepared to navigate the forthcoming legal battle. I left the meeting feeling more confident than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that I was fighting for a just and deserved future for myself and my son. We planned to highlight their financial reliance on me, a strategy pivotal for both the custody dispute and the division of assets. This realization bolstered my confidence. The law was in my corner, and I was braced for the fight. At home, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Mrs. Samantha's efforts to belittle me escalated. "You think you're clever," she sneered, accusing me of being heartless for leaving. I met her gaze squarely, my response firm. "No, I'm simply asserting myself." Jacob's venomous retort that I would regret my decision and couldn't manage without him only solidified my resolve. His intimidation tactics no longer affected me. As the court date approached, I diligently prepared, compiling financial records, documenting their derogatory comments, and gathering evidence of their neglect. Amidst this, my son's voice, tinged with uncertainty, broke through. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" His question, filled with innocence, prompted a deep protective instinct. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay. We're leaving for a brighter, happier life, just the two of us," I reassured him, his embrace tightening in response. That moment crystallized my conviction. I was fighting for our future. With the court hearing on the horizon, a mix of anxiety and resolve filled me. I was prepared to confront Jacob and Mrs. Samantha to put an end to their manipulative control and emotional torment. It was time to reclaim my autonomy and secure a serene, joyful future for my son. The courtroom symbolized not just a legal battleground, but a gateway to liberation and justice. As I faced them across the room, the sureness of the situation was palpable, yet my determination was unwavering. This was the moment of reckoning. This was the moment that would redefine everything. The courtroom setting was stark, the initial proceedings marked by a formal chill. Jacob's defense painted him as a dedicated father and husband, unjustly accused, while Mrs. Samantha portrayed herself as the aggrieved mother-in-law, slighted by an unthankful daughter-in-law. Yet their attempts to sway the court were unconvincing, their fabrications fragile under scrutiny. When it was my turn to speak, my voice was clear and composed. I outlined my role as the family's main financial support, highlighting the pressures from my husband's lack of employment and his mother's manipulative tactics. Jacob's attempt to counter, feigning injury and professing his support, was met with my direct challenge. "Support," I countered, "is demonstrated through actions, not empty words, and his actions were marked by neglect and mistreatment." The evidence I presented was compelling financial records, audio of their disparaging remarks, and witness accounts from neighbors familiar with their conduct. The undeniable truth of their behavior was laid bare as the presentation unfolded. Jacob's pretense started to falter, and Mrs. Samantha's feigned innocence began to unravel, revealing their true natures. The turning point came with the unveiling of indisputable evidence of Jacob's unfaithfulness and Mrs. Samantha's secret relationship with a well-off neighbor, Mr. Carter. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the images and documents were shown, irrefutably exposing their duplicity. Jacob's face drained of color, and Mrs. Samantha was visibly shaken, her outrage palpable as she accused us of violating their privacy. I remained calm, My response to Mrs. Samantha's outcry was measured yet assertive. The intrusion into their private matters was not the issue. The real issue was their actions and the impact of those actions on our family. The evidence spoke volumes, shifting the court's perception and paving the way for a verdict that would reflect the truth of our circumstances and my commitment to securing a better future for my son and me. The legal battle was intense, but it was a necessary step towards closing a painful chapter and moving forward with hope and dignity. I revealed the hidden truths about them, truths they had kept under wraps for too long. The judge had to restore order in the courtroom, but the impact was irreversible. Their reputations were damaged beyond repair, their deceptions laid bare for all to see. As the hearing wrapped up, the judge's decision was unequivocal. I was awarded full custody of our son, along with a just division of our assets. Jacob and Mrs. Samantha were left to face the consequences of their actions, their public images in ruins. Stepping out of the courtroom, I felt an immense burden lift from my shoulders. The prolonged period of manipulation and emotional torment was finally behind me. Standing my ground against those who sought to belittle me, I had triumphed. The most rewarding moment, however, was when my son embraced me outside the courthouse, his expression one of sheer relief and happiness. "We did it, Mom!" he exclaimed joyfully. "Yes, we did," I affirmed, holding him tight. "We're free now. This is just the start for us." As we walked away together, I realized this victory wasn't just mine. It represented hope for anyone who has ever felt diminished, powerless, or undervalued. It was a win for honesty and justice, marking the beginning of a hopeful and brighter chapter. The fallout from the court's decision was swift and dramatic. News of Jacob and Mrs. Samantha's deceit quickly spread, sullying their names within our community. Their once respected facade crumbled, leaving them exposed. In the aftermath, as I focused on building a new life with my son, a part of me took solace in knowing that Jacob and Mrs. Samantha were finally accountable for their misdeeds. One evening, as I was making dinner, an unexpected guest appeared. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter's wife, her eyes brimming with tears. "Kinsley, I've heard about everything. I can't fathom what Sylvia, Mrs. Samantha, has done," she shared, her voice trembling with emotion. I welcomed her inside and offered her a cup of tea. Sitting at the kitchen table, she shared her heartache, feeling betrayed by someone she considered a friend and neighbor. Listening, I offered comforting words, empathizing with her pain. The conversation was a reminder of the far-reaching consequences of deceit, not just within my family, but in the lives of others around us. Mrs. Samantha's actions had consequences far beyond what she had imagined. The next day, I ran into Jacob in town. He looked completely changed. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a defeated demeanor. "Kinsley, can we talk?" he asked quietly, almost in a whisper. I paused, facing him. "What's there to talk about, Jacob?" He seemed lost for words, his gaze avoiding mine. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't see how much I relied on you." "On your strength," he admitted. His apology, though belated, highlighted a significant shift in our dynamic. He had lost so much, his pride, his home, his family. It was only in his downfall that he recognized his mistakes. Mrs. Samantha suffered even more severe consequences. Her affair with Mr. Carter not only destroyed her social standing, but also brought legal challenges. Mrs. Carter had initiated a divorce and filed a lawsuit against Mrs. Samantha for alienation of affection. The neighborhood was abuzz with talk of Mrs. Samantha's predicament, painting a portrait of a woman overwhelmed by the outcomes of her own schemes. One day, I saw Mrs. Samantha in the grocery store. She seemed to be avoiding eye contact, rushing through the aisles. When we accidentally crossed paths, the disdain and despair in her eyes were evident. "You did this to me," she muttered as she hurried past. Watching her leave, I felt a combination of pity and justification for her situation. "No, Sylvia. You brought this upon yourself," I thought, realizing that their current hardships were the direct result of their own deceit and manipulation. Observing Jacob and Mrs. Samantha grapple with the aftermath, I understood that the truest form of revenge was simply living a good life, far removed from their negative influence. As I redirected my attention to my son and our fresh start, it became clear that this experience was not merely about retribution, but about emancipation, breaking free from the grip of abuse and dominance. Looking ahead, I felt optimistic. This journey wasn't just about overcoming the past. It was about stepping into a future brimming with possibilities. A testament to the strength found in liberation and the promise of brighter days ahead.
I found myself unexpectedly witnessing my husband's affair, an experience I believe to be quite rare. Most people discover infidelity through incriminating messages on their smartphones, but in my case, I saw it happen before my eyes. And what's even more surprising is the location where it unfolded, witnessed by numerous people. I'm Sarah, a full-time homemaker, and we have a 10-year-old son. On the day when I stumbled upon this affair, my husband had a day off, and we had plans for a family outing. However, when I woke up that morning, I realized that my husband was already gone. There was a message on my smartphone from him, explaining that my sister had a slight fever of 36 degrees Celsius, so he decided to take care of her since no one else was at home. He assured me he'd be back in the evening. I couldn't help but sigh deeply. I had promised our son a trip to the amusement park that day, and he had eagerly looked forward to it since the previous day. My husband had been swamped with a major project at work for the past 6 months, hardly ever taking a break. So this day off was a precious opportunity for some family quality time. However, he chose to attend to his sick sister. Now you might wonder what the problem is. After all, he's helping his ailing sister, right? Well, here's the catch. My husband has what some might call a sister complex. He used to tell me, "You're wonderful because you're just like my sister." And this used to give me an uneasy feeling. His sister is a remarkably beautiful and kind person, and I suppose resembling her is the highest form of compliment from my husband. However, it always made me a bit uncomfortable, despite the infuriation it would bring. However, the real issue is his tendency to disappear every morning, even on his days off, like today. On his days off, couldn't he at least spend some quality time with our child, who is undeniably a daddy's boy and often cries for his attention? When my husband is absent, he shows a striking indifference towards our child. He doesn't even bother to prepare birthday presents or participate in school events, regardless of how much free time he has. Sometimes, even when he returns home early, he simply retreats to his room, immersing himself in video games. He hardly ever engages with our son, who was once a daddy's boy. If this pattern continues, our son may eventually start seeing his father as a stranger. Speaking of my husband being busy due to a major project, that was a blatant falsehood. In reality, he hardly ever spends time at home. Once, I questioned a former classmate who works at the same company as my husband about his workload. To my surprise, my classmate burst into laughter and revealed that my husband is, in fact, a window-side employee, always appearing free because he has minimal work responsibilities. He consistently leaves work on time and never looks fatigued from overtime. Even though he claimed to be overseeing a significant project, his salary remains in the 200,000 yen range. Despite harboring numerous dissatisfactions, I went ahead and prepared breakfast. However, something felt amiss. Typically, my husband wakes up by 7 o'clock, even if I don't rouse him. But today, the clock had already passed that time, and he risked missing our child's bus to nursery school. In a rush, I ventured into my son's room to wake him. To my concern, he was still sound asleep. As I attempted to rouse him with a gentle nudge, instead of a response, I heard him groan in pain. Panicked, I reached out to touch my son's feverish face. His forehead was burning hot, and when I called his name and lightly shook his shoulder, he weakly murmured, "Mom, it hurts." I was on the verge of panic. Around this time, there had been an outbreak of an illness at the daycare center, and I feared my son might have fallen ill as well. I had heard of cases where people didn't survive this ailment, so I genuinely worried that my son might not pull through. I decided to reach out to my mother for some expert advice on first aid. She had a nursing background, so I believed her guidance would be invaluable. Follow. My son drank plenty of fluids while we waited. According to my mother, there was a risk of heat stroke. Considering the potential for infection, I couldn't accompany him in the ambulance. I quickly called a taxi and headed to the hospital where he would be taken. All the while, I continued trying to contact my husband, even though deep down, I knew it was futile. In desperation, I left a message online, hoping he would notice and come to our aid if he still felt any sense of responsibility. Upon arriving at the hospital, I anxiously waited in the corridor outside the emergency room, silently praying for my son's recovery. Memories of my father, who had once been taken into the emergency room and never came out, haunted my thoughts. I couldn't help but imagine the worst-case scenario. What if my son didn't make it either? My mother, who had rushed to the hospital, provided some much-needed comfort, assuring me that everything would be all right. An hour later, my son miraculously pulled through, though the doctors recommended he remain hospitalized for at least a week. Consequently, he was taken to a ward. To my disappointment, my husband didn't return home that day. The following day, I decided to visit my son in the hospital, bringing along a change of clothes and some fruit for him to enjoy. I also intended to express my gratitude to the doctor who had looked after us the previous day. As I walked past the emergency room, the atmosphere suddenly became chaotic. In my desperation, I tried calling my husband, but he didn't answer any of my calls or respond to my emails. There was simply no time to wait for a reply. I considered postponing my visit to the doctor, thinking that perhaps someone had been brought in, and I didn't want to get in the way. Just as I was about to head to my son's ward, I spotted a man and a woman being carried on a stretcher, barely covered by a blanket, almost as if they were naked. It seemed like they were still somehow connected, perhaps in one of those situations where certain physical aspects wouldn't disengage after an intimate encounter. Although I had never experienced it myself, I imagined it must be quite troublesome. Being transported in such a state must be incredibly embarrassing. As I pondered this and prepared to walk past, I inadvertently made eye contact with the man. In usual circumstances, it would have been an awkward situation, but for me, it was different. I was stunned because the man turned out to be my husband. "Why are you here like this?" I exclaimed in surprise. He seemed at a loss for words. I was equally confused. My son had just been admitted yesterday, and now my husband was in a similar predicament. What were the odds of that happening? Furthermore, why was my husband being transported in such a vulnerable state, and who was the woman with him? My mind was filled with a whirlwind of questions. Amidst all the confusion, I accidentally made eye contact with the woman who was intertwined with my husband. Even in my state of perplexity, I could tell that this woman was my husband's mistress. As I glared at her, I suddenly realized that her face was very familiar. "What? Here?" I heard her voice, and it finally clicked. Yes, that woman was Amelia, my husband's sister. In that moment, time seemed to stretch out infinitely. I began to suspect that my husband was lying about taking care of his sister and meeting another woman. But I never anticipated this. Even if he was coming to visit our son, he should not have arrived in such an intimate situation. However, the woman turned out to be his actual sister. There had to be limits to how much one could mess around. They were taken away on a stretcher, and all I could do was restrain my urge to confront them and wait. After all, there was no way for them to escape. I decided to address this later. With that thought in mind, I headed to visit my son, still feeling uneasy deep down. I spent some time in his room, trying to sort out my feelings. When I casually checked my phone, I noticed a multitude of messages from my husband online. Upon examining the content, it was clear that he was attempting to cover up his actions, not even mentioning our son's hospitalization. I chose to continue ignoring him and waited for another hour. Then, the doctor who had been in charge of my son the day before appeared. The doctor smiled at me and said, "Your son is doing remarkably well. He might be able to be discharged earlier than expected. His fever has subsided, and his condition seems to have completely stabilized. Initially, I was concerned about an infectious disease, but it appears he had a heat stroke in addition to the cold. You made sure he drank plenty of water, didn't you? That was the right move. You're a smart mother, and your son must be happy." He even praised me. If anything, it was thanks to my mother's advice. I deeply thanked the kind doctor and expressed my gratitude. However, beneath the surface, I knew I was about to face quite a storm. I had just been relieved about my son's condition, but inside, I was beginning to boil with anger. My face might have appeared calm, but I had inadvertently frightened my son. I quickly put on a smile and assured my son that I would be right back before stepping outside the hospital and calling my husband. who had left more than 100 unanswered calls. The moment my husband answered the phone, he began with a flurry of excuses, saying, "It's not what you think. There's a reason." It was evident that he had the order of priorities all wrong. Shouldn't he have been worried about our son first? There was no way a man who was so engrossed in his activities with his own sister, completely disregarding our son, would be genuinely concerned about him. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the kind of husband he had become. Concerned about my son's future and recognizing that my husband's character was unlikely to improve, I made the difficult decision to divorce him. I believed that life might become challenging, but I was willing to endure it for the sake of my son. I confronted my husband, saying, "You were busy with that even when our son was suffering, weren't you? You've always made time for it whenever you could, and with your own sister, it's truly disgusting." My husband was left speechless, and I continued, "Oh, and by the way, I've already informed your parents about this. I won't involve your company. It might be problematic if you can't meet alimony and child support payments. So, goodbye." Expressing my finality, I told my husband that I had already signed the divorce papers. 3 days later, my son's health improved more rapidly than expected. After completing the discharge procedures, we returned home together for the first time in a long while. Naturally, my husband wasn't there. After a period of commotion, my husband showed up to apologize in person. However, I presented him with the already signed divorce papers. He begged, saying, "It was my first time. Forgive me for this one mistake. You're all I have." I coldly responded, "So you're still lying. At this point, I already know everything. Your sister confessed to everything." I anticipated that my husband wouldn't easily agree to a divorce, so I decided to approach his sister, the person directly involved. "Sister-in-law," I began, "I heard you're going to have a wedding ceremony with your..." Her eyes widened, and she replied, "No way. You're not planning to talk about this, are you?" I smiled and said, "Yes, because I want everyone to understand what kind of person you are right away. If I disclose this, it will be crystal clear to everyone." She looked concerned and pleaded, "Please, anything but that. If you do that, my life will be ruined." Pretending to consider her request, I smiled and said, I guess we can't help it then. Here's an alternative. I'll keep quiet about this matter if you provide me with all the details of your involvement with my husband." I made a promise to my sister-in-law, ensuring that I would keep her secret. She confessed everything without hesitation, pleading with me not to reveal her actions to her younger brother. When I finally confronted my husband with this revelation, he was so shocked and betrayed that he fainted. He woke up, signed the divorce papers, and left the house in dejection. From that point on, I enlisted the help of my lawyer to pursue a divorce, custody of our son, Albany, and child support from my husband. He haggled over the amount, but when I whispered in his ear that I could expose the truth to his company, he relented and agreed to pay the amount I had requested. He left the lawyer's office with a heavy heart. Somehow, news of what happened at his company got out, and my husband was summoned and severely reprimanded. A month later, he was fired from his job and began working at a food factory, where he packed strawberries and cakes to meet his alimony and child support obligations. Even there, the knowledge of his actions seemed to follow him, with young girls constantly gossiping about him, making him uncomfortable. As for my husband's sister, although I hadn't exposed her directly, the truth came out, and she was dumped by her fiancé. It turned out that her boyfriend, like me, suspected infidelity and had hired a private investigator to conduct surveillance. She was demanded a significant sum of money as compensation for breaking off the engagement, and now she appears to be working at a nightclub. One day, her ex-boyfriend gave me a photo of them together, saying, "Use it if something happens." I wondered what possessed him to give such a thing to a woman like me, but I decided to keep it in my dresser, just in case. I moved back to my parents' home to start anew, and am working hard to raise my son with their support. My parents had longed to see their grandson since they lived far away, and they are assisting me as much as they can. I don't want to overburden them, so I only ask for their help when necessary. By the way, my son, who once suffered from a high fever, has been healthy ever since. 3 years later, he is consistently recognized for perfect attendance at school. He seems to have completely forgotten about his biological father and is enjoying his life to the fullest every day. This is what brings me the greatest happiness. Oh, and I have a new addition to the family, a white cat named Snow. Snow used to frequent my yard before I moved, and when I said my final goodbye, it climbed onto my lap and refused to leave. So, I decided to bring Snow home with me. Now, Snow has become an important part of my family, just as cherished as my son. I look forward to watching my son grow alongside my parents and Snow. As I stroked Snow on the porch, I reflected on these thoughts.
My name is Lily, a 25-year-old college senior with dreams of becoming a marketing representative. Today, instead of reveling in the joy of graduation, I find myself ensnared in a living nightmare. It's been barely a day since we laid my father, Nathan, to rest. Despite the miles that often lay between us, his presence was a beacon of love and warmth. Now, with him gone, our home feels desolate, a stark emptiness pervading every corner. As I stand frozen in the entryway, my mother Addison and my sister Aurora shatter the silence, their words slicing through the air like a blade. "We're going to sell the house," Addison declares, her voice devoid of emotion. It's as if the very foundation of our family is being auctioned off, piece by piece. The thought of losing the home where my father's laughter once filled the air is unbearable. Aurora's mocking tone, questioning my right to feel aggrieved, feels like a betrayal. Their rush towards financial gain in the wake of our loss feels like a mockery of my father's memory. "You're the worst," I lash out, the pain and anger bubbling over. In the midst of this turmoil, the doorbell's chime cuts through the tension. Standing at the threshold is a stranger clad in a dark suit. "My condolences," he intones solemnly as I usher him in, my heart heavy with the weight of our family's fragmented bonds. As we sit at the dining table, the absence of my father's presence is palpable. The decision to sell our home feels like the final nail in the coffin of our family unity. My mother and sister seem all too ready to embrace a life of luxury, indifferent to the emotional wreckage left in their wake. My father was the glue that held us together, and with him gone, the facade of family solidarity crumbles. Feeling alienated and disillusioned, I'm on the brink of severing ties when the doorbell rings again, heralding yet another bearer of unwelcome news. The visitor, a relic from my father's past, introduces himself as Mr. Easton, my father's attorney. His arrival, amidst the discord of our family life, seems almost anachronistic as he produces a stack of documents from his briefcase, his expression grave. Addison and Aurora watch from the kitchen, their curiosity mingled with annoyance. As Mr. Easton begins to speak, it's clear that the revelations about my father's affairs will only add another layer to the complex tapestry of our family's challenges. Mr. Easton, adjusting his glasses with a sense of solemn duty, prepares to unveil the contents of my father Nathan's will, hinting at revelations that could further destabilize our already fragile family dynamic. As he begins, the air thickens with anticipation. My mother Addison leans forward, her interest unmistakably piqued, while my sister Aurora feigns indifference, yet remains within earshot, unable to hide her curiosity. The tension in the room escalates as Mr. Easton clears his throat, signaling the moment of truth. Both Addison and Aurora edge closer, their attempts to conceal their eagerness crumbling under the weight of the moment. "In accordance with your father's wishes," Mr. Easton begins, his gaze sweeping across us, assessing our readiness for the impending disclosure. My heart sinks, a familiar sense of foreboding taking hold, a byproduct of years spent navigating the expectations of my mother and sister. As Mr. Easton articulates my father's final requests, it becomes clear that the ground beneath us is shifting. "To my daughter Lily, I bequeath my entire estate, including our family home and all my savings and investments." The room falls eerily quiet, save for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock and the flutter of pages as Mr. Easton continues. My own heartbeat roars in my ears, disbelief and confusion swirling within me. "There's gotta be a mistake," I finally muster the courage to say, my voice feeling alien. Aurora's reaction is swift and visceral, her chair scraping against the floor as she rises, her face a turbulent mix of shock and indignation. Addison sits frozen, her expression one of utter disbelief, unable to articulate her shock. Jaden, who had remained unobtrusively in the background, steps forward with a protective stance, possibly to calm Aurora or to challenge the veracity of Mr. Easton's declaration. "This has to be some sort of mistake, right?" he challenges, the atmosphere charged with a palpable sense of incredulity and brewing conflict. Mr. Easton responds with a grave shake of his head, dispelling any hopes of a misunderstanding. "There's no mistake," he affirms. Nathan had been explicit in his wishes. He believed that Lily, with her strong principles and dedication, was the most suited to uphold his legacy and manage his wealth with care. As this truth sinks in, Addison finds her voice, transforming her disbelief into indignation. "And what about us?" she demands, her tone sharp with resentment. "Are we to be left with nothing while she inherits it all?" The question lingers heavily in the room, magnifying the tension between us. Caught between the honor of my father's trust and the visible bitterness from my mother and sister, I'm speechless. The responsibility now resting on my shoulders feels as daunting as navigating through their palpable discontent. Mr. Easton's gaze finds mine, offering a silent reassurance. Nathan had his reasons, which he believed would eventually be understood, he explains, suggesting we focus on what comes next and the specifics of the estate. His words prompt me to ponder what my father saw in me and how I could possibly live up to his expectations amid our family's fractured unity. The atmosphere, heavy with the aftermath of Mr. Easton's announcement, mirrors the deep sorrow of my father's funeral. Addison and Aurora's vehement protests clash with my own shock, creating a tumultuous silence that none of us seem ready to break. We stand at an impasse, the stark reality of my father's will slicing through the room like a chill wind. Mr. Easton continues, turning his attention to me with a mention of a personal letter from my father, intended for me after the will's reading. Aurora breaks the tense silence, her disbelief sharp. "But there has to be a mistake. How can she inherit everything?" Her protest echoes around us, signaling the onset of a conflict I have no wish to engage in. Jaden attempts to calm her with a gentle hand, but it does little to quell her fervor. "And what about us?" Aurora persists, her frustration mounting. "Are we just strangers he chose to cast aside after all we've done?" Her words, sharp and accusing, aim to wound, reflecting a crescendo of incredulity and hurt. Addison's initial shock shifts to visible anger, aligning with Aurora's outrage. "Exactly," she agrees, the possibility of an oversight or a challenge to the will becoming a beacon for their anger. "This is outrageous," she declares, the notion of being left out fueling their combined disbelief and anger. As Addison's grip tightens around the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white with tension, I finally manage to break the silence with a voice that sounds all too weak, even to my own ears. I just can't understand. Why would Dad make this decision? What was he thinking?" My mind is a whirlwind of confusion, every thought a question mark hovering over the memory of a man I'm now realizing I may never have fully understood. Mr. Easton, with a weary sigh, removes his glasses and massages the bridge of his nose, signaling the gravity of the moment. "Nathan had his motives, which he wanted you to comprehend in his own words," he explains. Then, turning his attention to Addison and Aurora, he adds, "You're free to challenge the will if you choose. But be aware that Nathan's wishes were clear and legally solidified, reflecting his sound judgment at the time." The room erupts into turmoil once again as Addison and Aurora voice their disbelief and scramble to formulate a response. Their voices become a distant buzz as my focus shifts to the unopened letter lying on the table, a tangible piece of my father's legacy that seems to weigh heavily in the room. With a deep breath, I muster the courage to pick up the letter, its paper feeling paradoxically light yet laden with significance. As I carefully unfold it, the anticipation feels overwhelming, akin to standing on the threshold of a new realm, one that promises insights from a man who chose posthumous words over those in life. This inheritance, now symbolically resembling a poisoned chalice more than a gift, beckons with a silent call to understanding. Secluded in the solitude of my room, The door firmly shut behind me. I gently unfold the letter, my hands trembling as if touching a sacred relic. Each fold of the paper seems to whisper echoes of my father's voice, bringing his presence into the room as the inked words begin to reveal themselves. Dearest Lily, it starts, in the familiar handwriting that brings a surge of emotions. As you read this, I am filled with sorrow. Sorrow for not being there to express these words in person, and sorrow for leaving you a burden that no parent should ever place upon their child. His immediate apology slices through the air, cutting more deeply than any legal document could, grounding me back to the essence of who my father was. Breathing in deeply, the faint scent of ink on the paper brings an unexpected comfort. Your strength, your discipline, and your unwavering commitment to a better, more honest world have never escaped my notice. In you, I saw the beacon of a future defined by integrity and a resolute stand against the allure of greed. Holding the letter, it trembles not from the draft, but from the overwhelming realization of the faith and hope my father had placed in me, a legacy far beyond the confines of material wealth. Through the delicate frame of the old window, the quiver in my hands wasn't stirred by the breeze, but by a surge of emotions that the letter released. As my eyes moved down the page, my father's words painted a vivid picture of his silent observations and the support he had always held close. He acknowledged the challenges I faced within our home, recognizing my endurance and efforts amidst the indifference from my mother and sister. This recognition, conveyed through his decision to entrust me with everything he owned, was his way of amending the undue burdens I had shouldered. Each word woven into the letter was a testament to his deep-seated awareness and quiet encouragement. The father I had perceived as distant had been attentively present all along, understanding far more than he ever expressed. His hope was that the legacy he left behind would grant me the liberty and resources needed to chase my dreams, to step beyond the constraints and mend what had been broken long before I had the chance to influence it. "Live the life you deserve, my dear Lily," he wrote, urging me to embrace a future filled with promise and free from the shadows of past grievances. Clutching the letter to my heart, I felt a newfound resolve coursing through me, mingled with the sorrow that had been my constant companion since his departure. Stepping out from the solace of my room, I re-entered the ongoing tumult of our divided household. Mr. Easton looked up, his gaze asking silent questions. Addison's stare was icy, and Aurora, previously seething with anger, now seemed lost in a whirl of desperation. "It's time to discuss our next steps," I declared, my voice carrying a strength bolstered by my father's unseen support. Addison's response was a scoff, a clear signal of her intent to contest the will, with Aurora echoing her determination not to let this pass unchallenged. Mr. Easton, however, cautioned them, outlining the potential for a protracted and expensive legal battle, one with an uncertain outcome given the clear and lawful stipulations of my father's will. Holding on to the profound insights shared in my father's letter, I confronted the disarray before me. This was not a path I had chosen, but it was the one my father had laid out for me, and I was committed to honoring his wishes. The air was thick with tension, a tangible barrier between us, yet amidst the turmoil, a singular truth emerged. I was resolved to fulfill my responsibilities, to uphold the legacy my father entrusted to me, and, in doing so, perhaps carve out a new direction towards a brighter, more hopeful future. In the days that followed, our home transformed into a battleground, a physical manifestation of the conflicts that had long simmered beneath the surface. In the midst of silent tension and explosive disputes, Addison and Aurora delved into legal research and sought advice from attorneys, driven by a fervent hope to challenge the will. They clung to the conviction that they were rightfully owed a share of Nathan's legacy, viewing it not as the culmination of a man's life's work, but as an entitlement. Despite their endeavors, Mr. Easton remained a beacon of steadiness, his unshakable calm providing solace as we ventured through the complex process of estate settlement. "The will is ironclad, Lily," he reassured me, his words a balm over the bitter coffee we shared in the seldom-used dining room. "You have no cause to worry about their challenges." Yet, despite his reassurances, a gnawing guilt persisted within me. Was it just to inherit everything? leaving my mother and sister with nothing? Logic reminded me of my father's deliberate choices, but my heart wrestled with a lingering sense of duty to my family, a yearning to repair bonds I knew were irreparably damaged. I dedicated my days to preparing for the expected legal battles and acquainting myself with my father's financial legacy. The weight of this responsibility was immense, each decision about properties and investments plunging me deeper into a maze of uncertainty. Yet fueled by my father's faith in me, I pressed on, determined to honor his legacy and carve a future that reflected my values. As I navigated the financial intricacies of my inheritance, my thoughts often drifted to the possibilities that lay beyond the confines of our fraught family home. How could I leverage this inheritance to make a meaningful difference? How could I align my actions with my beliefs in a way that would create lasting change? Throughout this period, Addison and Aurora's frustration manifested in petty squabbles and veiled threats. Aurora laid claim to sentimental heirlooms in a bid for emotional leverage, while Addison insinuated she knew damaging secrets about Nathan, all aimed at undermining my resolve. Yet I had grown skilled at maneuvering through their emotional manipulations. One evening, as the atmosphere grew particularly charged with unspoken threats and icy glares, I reached my limit. "Enough!" I declared, the word cutting sharply through the air, drawing startled looks from all present. "I can't grant you what Dad chose not to leave you, but I can offer you a chance to begin anew elsewhere." Their surprise was evident, marking a sudden shift in our ongoing conflict. "It won't afford you a life of luxury," I continued, "but it will offer you a fresh start." This proposal, a gesture towards reconciliation without compromising my father's wishes, introduced a new pathway forward, one that might allow us to find peace amidst the turmoil. Addison's laugh, devoid of any real mirth, echoed through the room, a sharp and humorless sound. "A parting gift from our dear Lily. How generous," she sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. This was a type of pain I had grown accustomed to, a sting that once would have wounded me deeply, but now barely grazed the surface, thanks to the resilience I had built over years of facing such antagonism. I remained unshaken, my resolve clear. "This isn't a prize, it's an option. Take it or leave it. But know this, I'm moving forward, whether you're with me or not." Their response was a complex blend of silence and reluctant acceptance, a fragile peace brokered at the intersection of desperation and pragmatism. Withdrawing to the solitude of my room, the letter from my father felt like a tangible reminder of the path I was on, a journey that was as much about discovering who I'd become in the wake of his legacy as it was about the inheritance itself. Time passed, marking its passage in the rhythm of daily routines, meetings with Mr. Easton, and the slow, deliberate process of claiming my inheritance. Addison and Aurora, having grudgingly accepted my proposition, began to search for a simpler place to call home. The atmosphere at home shifted, becoming less charged, though a residual coldness lingered, a reminder of the emotional frost that winter couldn't explain. In this period of enforced solitude amid the remnants of familial conflict, the house seemed to expand, each room echoing with the absence marked by packed boxes and disappearing furniture. My father's study remained a sanctuary of sorts, untouched and preserving a moment in time when familial discord was a mere whisper, not the cacophony it had become. The day they left, Addison and Aurora stepping out of the house for the last time was marked by a transaction both financial and emotional. With a final check signed and a curt farewell, they departed, carrying with them the last pieces of a shared past now irrevocably altered. Watching their car fade into the distance, I felt a complex wave of relief and melancholy wash over me. It was time to face the future. With Mr. Easton's guidance, I began to lay the groundwork for what was to come, navigating the delicate balance between honoring my father's wishes and forging my own path. This new chapter, though daunting, was mine to write, a journey of self-discovery and the pursuit of a legacy that, while born from loss, was defined by the promise of new beginnings. In honor of my father, I established a charitable foundation bearing his name, aimed at enriching the lives of young, underprivileged students by providing them with educational opportunities. These efforts mirrored my own past, a time when I doubted my dreams within a home environment that seemed indifferent to my ambitions. Alongside this endeavor, I embarked on my own academic journey, enrolling in graduate school for journalism, a field I had long aspired to join. This decision set me on a path toward realizing the career I had always imagined, one that my father and I had envisioned during countless long-distance conversations that now felt as though they belonged to another era. My days became a whirlwind of activity, pursuing stories and advocating for justice, driven by the legacy and the network my father had left behind. The once overwhelming quiet of the house gave way to a bustling hub of life and creativity. I took to personalizing my space, painting walls, rearranging furniture, and welcoming a rescue dog into my life, whose exuberance and companionship breathed new life into the once somber atmosphere. The home that had once been the backdrop to familial discord transformed into a welcoming space for friends, colleagues, and moments of solitude. Occasionally, I would retreat to my father's study, immersing myself in the echoes of his presence found in old letters and the worn pages of his books. It was here, among these remnants of his thoughts and dreams, that I would reflect on the profound impact of his final message to me. Duty and love, he had penned, are the most potent forces at our command. Wield them wisely. Surrounded by the tangible legacy of his words and the wisdom he had imparted, I would silently renew my vow to live by these principles. These quiet moments in the study, enveloped by my father's enduring influence, served as a reminder of the promise I had made to myself and to him. With each day through the work of the foundation, my studies, and my budding career in journalism, I strive to fulfill that promise, channeling the strength of duty and the depth of love into every action and decision, honoring his memory by forging a path that was not only true to his vision, but also to the aspirations we had once dreamt of together. One day, out of nowhere, my husband William dropped a bombshell on me. With a wide grin, he announced his plans to use the $2 million inheritance I'd received to give our family home a complete makeover. I was dumbfounded, my words trapped in a throat tightened by shock. This inheritance was a parting gift from my dear father, a secret I had kept close to my chest, especially from William. Over the years, his controlling nature had grown, igniting thoughts of divorce in my mind, and revealing the existence of this money to him was the last thing I wanted. His greed was no secret to me, but how he unearthed this particular secret was beyond my comprehension. When pressed, William confessed to having coerced my mother into revealing the inheritance. I was livid, unable to fathom his audacity. Our arguments escalated, yet he remained unfazed, dismissing my concerns with a smirk, declaring the renovation plans as final. My name is Ava, a 25-year-old branch manager employee. My hectic job schedule left little room for romantic pursuits, so I took a leap of faith and registered with a matchmaking agency. That's where I met William, a cheerful car service driver, a year my senior. Our paths would likely never have crossed otherwise. Meeting someone like you, Ava, feels like I've hit the jackpot, he said, his cheeks flushed with a bashful red. I reciprocated his feelings, and when he proposed marriage with such earnestness, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our love story began on a high note, culminating in marriage 4 years ago. Initially, our marriage was filled with love and mutual admiration. William often praised my work ethic and success. However, as time passed, his demeanor shifted. Sarcastic comments about my income became frequent, and it wasn't just William. My in-laws, once warm and welcoming, turned distant and cold. My dear Ava, working at a major branch manager is quite the feat. We're so proud our son married you, they would say, their initial support slowly morphing into expectations of financial assistance. Ava, you're doing well for yourself, aren't you? I could really use a designer bag. You wouldn't mind helping us out now and then, right? My mother-in-law pressed, taking for granted that I would comply. I was taken aback. But I recently bought you a dress for your birthday. I don't make it a habit to lend or borrow money, not even among family, I responded, hoping to set clear boundaries. Their reaction was explosive. Accusations flew, revealing their true intentions. "How dare you refuse us? We only consented to this marriage because of your lucrative job. To think we can't stand your outspokenness." My mother-in-law railed against me. The audacity of their demands, expecting me to finance their desires simply because I had a well-paying job, was appalling. Their transformation from supportive in-laws to greedy dependents was a stark reminder of the challenges that come with navigating family dynamics, especially when money is involved. Time and again, my in-laws pressed me for money, growing increasingly insistent with each refusal. "You're not giving us what we want. You're the most uncooperative daughter-in-law," my father-in-law berated me, his wife nodding in agreement. William, standing by, offered no support, merely echoing his parents' harsh criticisms. To make matters worse, he had a habit of indulging in costly takeouts and lavish furniture, justifying his spending by pointing out my substantial income. This wouldn't have been an issue if he had been spending his own money, but his earnings were insufficient, leaving me to cover these extravagant expenses. The continuous lack of support from William and the outright hostility from his parents made me seriously consider divorce as the only viable solution. Given that we had no children, I thought the decision would be straightforward. Yet, when I attempted to discuss the possibility with William, he dodged the conversation, claiming fatigue and promptly retreating to our bedroom, avoiding any serious discussion. During this turbulent time, I received distressing news from my mother. She informed me that my father was seriously ill and required immediate hospitalization. I hurried to prepare for a visit to the hospital. William, noticing my rush, inquired about my haste. I explained my father's critical condition, only to receive a disinterested hum in response. Disheartened by his indifference, especially given the situation involved his father-in-law, I decided to focus on my family's needs without seeking any further support from him. Upon arriving at the hospital, my mother and I met with the doctors, who diagnosed my father with cancer, indicating he had limited time left. Shocked and saddened by this revelation, we debated whether to disclose the full extent of his condition to him, ultimately deciding that honesty was the best policy, knowing he would want to be aware. Returning home emotionally drained, I was met with William's callous inquiry about my visit. Despite my growing resentment towards his insensitivity, I shared the grave news about my father's health. His response was cold and tactless, even hinting at the stress our potential divorce might cause my ailing father. This lack of empathy from William only deepened my resolve to end our marriage, underscoring the vast emotional chasm that had developed between us. William's insensitive remarks about being ready for a divorce anytime only served to deepen my resentment towards him. His thoughtless comments about my father's illness and the prospect of divorce left me feeling even more alienated. Despite this, I chose not to discuss the possibility of separation further with my father already in a fragile state. It seemed to William that avoiding the divorce conversation was a win for him, which only emboldened his disregard for my feelings. His behavior grew even more galling when he began to inquire about my father's inheritance, eagerly asking how much he would receive as the son-in-law. His blatant greed at such a sensitive time was appalling. I firmly reminded him that my father was still alive, and that such discussions were not only premature, but also incredibly insensitive. Yet William remained unfazed by my objections, his eagerness for the inheritance utterly distasteful to me. This led me to spend more time at my parents' home, seeking solace in proximity to the hospital during my father's final days. After a heartfelt battle with his illness, my father passed away peacefully. The loss was profound, leaving my mother and me to navigate our grief as we prepared for his funeral. Despite our estrangement, I felt it necessary to inform William of my father's passing and the upcoming funeral, adhering to the formalities expected between us as spouses, however distant. His response was perfunctory, devoid of genuine sympathy. I had held a faint hope that he might show some respect by attending the funeral, but he did not, confirming his lack of empathy and consideration. Following the funeral, a meeting with my family was convened to discuss the inheritance, as per my father's wishes. The proceedings went smoothly, thanks to my father's foresight and planning. It was a small comfort, providing a sense of closure amidst the sorrow. With a heavy heart, I returned home, bracing myself for what lay ahead with William. Upon my return, William's reaction was predictably self-centered, showing more interest in the financial implications of my father's passing than in offering support or condolences. This further convinced me of the need to sever ties, as the gap between us had grown too wide and too deep to bridge. My resolve to pursue a divorce was solidified, driven by the desire to find peace and start anew, away from the toxicity that had come to define my marriage with William. Upon William's unexpected revelation that he intended to use the $2 million inheritance for home renovations, I was utterly astonished, finding myself momentarily voiceless. This was the first I'd heard of any plan regarding the inheritance, and William's knowledge of the amount was a complete shock to me. "What are you talking about?" "I'm unaware of any substantial sum," I managed to respond, my confusion evident. William, with a dismissive laugh, admitted to having pressured my mother into disclosing details about the inheritance by threatening her with divorce. His manipulation was appalling. To stoop so low as to threaten my mother just to get your hands on the inheritance is despicable, I retorted, my anger surging uncontrollably. William, unfazed by my reaction, declared that the renovation plans were already set in motion, proudly boasting about securing the funds while I was preoccupied with funeral arrangements and other responsibilities. I was dumbfounded. William's audacity left me no choice but to firmly decide on divorce, despite his arrogant suggestion that I either move in with his parents or leave. His smugness was intolerable. "Divorce it is, then." "And no, I won't regret this decision," I stated with resolution, rejecting his notion that I would second-guess my choice. William's response was a cold laugh as he handed me a business card for a lawyer, instructing me to ensure the inheritance was transferred to his account. Packing my belongings, I left our shared home, ignoring William's continued reminders about the inheritance. When I shared the entire ordeal with my mother, she was shocked, apologizing for unwittingly giving William information after his threats. I reassured her, emphasizing that William's actions were inexcusable and asked if I could stay at the family home temporarily. She agreed without hesitation. The next day, my phone was inundated with calls from William, all of which I ignored. His persistence escalated to him showing up at my parents' house, causing a scene in an attempt to force a confrontation. Despite my reluctance, my mother suggested I speak with him to avoid further upsetting the neighbors. Although skeptical of any productive outcome, I was prepared to face William, if only to assert my decision and seek an end to this turmoil. Understanding the gravity of the situation, I hesitantly engaged with William, who refused to leave our doorstep. Keeping the security chain fastened, I cracked the door open only to be met with his demand for the $2 million for renovations he claimed he couldn't afford without it. His frustration was palpable as he tried to push his way through the door. Staying composed, I informed him that the situation was being reviewed, which only added to his confusion. "What do you mean under consideration?" he questioned, bewildered. It was then I revealed the truth that my inheritance was not in cash, but rather my father's vacation home, which naturally couldn't be transferred to him. William's shock was evident as he struggled to comprehend how he had prematurely committed to a renovation contract based on expected funds. I trusted a family connection in the construction business, believing the inheritance would be available soon, William admitted, his plan unraveling. I reminded him of my previous warnings about the precarious nature of his assumptions regarding our divorce and the inheritance. His desperation grew as he revealed a $45,000 deposit already paid, with plans to cover the rest through installments now dashed. William tried to assert that as my husband, he was entitled to a share of the property, but I stood firm. "You're mistaken, William. Inheritance law clearly states that such property is mine alone. We're no longer a unit, but strangers," I declared confidently. His frustration quickly turned to anger, and as he raised his voice, threatening to halt the divorce proceedings and demanding the inheritance, my mother, sensing the escalating threat, called the police. William, realizing the seriousness of our actions, retracted, but not without a parting sneer, proclaiming he was done with the situation before making a hasty exit. Following his departure, the police arrived, Their advice clear: prioritize my safety and maintain a strict no-contact stance with William. They suggested keeping the doors locked at all times and to act as if I was not home if he returned. The officer's guidance was a sobering reminder of the importance of safeguarding myself against any further confrontations, marking a definitive end to a chapter filled with turmoil and uncertainty. 6 days after the incident with William, the police contacted me about some crucial documents related to my father's estate. I had placed these documents in my bag for safekeeping when I moved back to my parents' home post-divorce. To my dismay, I discovered they were missing, a mystery that was solved when the police informed me they had been recovered. Upon arriving at the police station, I was taken aback to find William there. The shock deepened when it was revealed that William had stolen the documents. Confronted for an explanation, he looked defeated and attempted to justify his actions. He claimed to have rifled through my belongings, mistaking the significance of the paperwork he found for liquid assets from my inheritance. William admitted that his realization of the document's true nature, the title to my father's vacation home, only came after I clarified the inheritance wasn't in cash. His plan had been to sell the title, wrongly assuming it would be an easy conversion into cash, dragging my in-laws into his scheme to approach a real estate agent. However, their efforts were futile since the property was still legally under my father's name, and the inheritance had not yet been officially divided among his heirs. I was in the midst of legally transferring the title to my name, which would prevent William from selling the property without my agreement. As the real estate agent refused to proceed with the sale due to these complications, William's frustration boiled over, leading him to make unfounded accusations against me to the police. He desperately pleaded his innocence, claiming he was attempting to sell the property on my behalf, a stark contradiction to his earlier admission of theft. In response to his erratic behavior and false claims, I remained calm, clarifying to the officer that I had not authorized William to sell anything. The documents he had taken were merely copies, rendering them useless for his intended purposes. Despite his protests and attempts to shift blame onto me, it was clear William had acted alone in his criminal endeavor. The situation escalated as William, caught in his web of lies and facing the consequences of his actions, could do nothing but express his frustration. It was a moment of reckoning for William, forced to confront the reality of his actions and their impact not just on me, but on himself as well. Following William's arrest for theft, the fallout was immediate and widespread. The news of his arrest, combined with the forfeiture of the $45,000 deposit, thrust my in-laws into an unwelcome spotlight, revealing them as the family of a convicted criminal. The community's reaction forced them to leave their town, seeking anonymity elsewhere. However, their troubles didn't end with relocation. My in-laws, unable to let go of their grievances, began to harass the real estate agency that had exposed William's fraudulent scheme. Their actions, driven by resentment, included making menacing calls and spreading false rumors, all aimed at discrediting the agency. In response, the agency, rightfully incensed, pursued legal action against them for obstructing business operations and attempting fraud by trying to sell a property that was not theirs. Caught in a legal bind, my in-laws were ordered to compensate for the damages, a financial burden that swiftly drained their savings. In a moment of desperation, they reached out to me, pleading for financial assistance. My former mother-in-law's voice cracked as she implored, "Ava, please. We've exhausted our savings on the deposit and now face crippling debt due to the settlement. Can't you spare some money? We promise to repay you." But sympathy was far from my mind. Why would you seek my help? I'm no longer William's wife, and to me, you're now just strangers, I replied, the firmness in my voice unmistakable. Despite their pleas, emphasizing their dire situation and promises of repayment, I remained unmoved. I highly doubt that. This conversation is over. Do not contact me again, I stated coldly, putting an end to the call and ensuring their numbers were blocked, just as Williams had been long ago. Aware of the potential risk posed by William's knowledge of my parents' home, I made the decision to sell the property. It was a precautionary move, aimed at safeguarding my mother and me from any future disturbances. Fortunately, the sale of my father's vacation home went smoothly, allowing us to find peace and security in a new setting. Now, in a different home, my mother and I have found tranquility, far removed from the turmoil that once surrounded us. We focus on preserving the precious memories of my father, cherishing the legacy he left behind, undisturbed by the chaos of the past. Our lives, now calm and secure, reflect the resilience and resolve it took to navigate through those stormy times and emerge stronger on the other side. Anna's journey is one of resilience and empowerment. It begins with her discovery of her husband Ronan's infidelity, a moment that would become the catalyst for her taking control of her life. Anna, a respected lawyer, valued her privacy greatly, and for this story, she uses pseudonyms to share her experience. The foundation of Anna and Ronan's relationship seemed solid at first. They were in love, married, and had built a life together. However, as time passed, Anna noticed unsettling signs of Ronan's infidelity, his avoidance, excessive time spent away from home, and frequent business trips. Despite Anna's success in her legal career, Ronan demeaned her achievements, comparing her unfavorably to himself and his business endeavors. The turning point came when Anna, driven by her suspicions during one of Ronan's trips, uncovered evidence of his affair on an old laptop. She found a secret Facebook account linking Ronan to another woman, someone he apparently found more desirable than Anna, often belittling Anna's appearance and dedication to her work. Confronted with the truth, Anna challenged Ronan. His response was cold and dismissive, further wounding Anna by stating she was no longer interesting to him, consumed by what he deemed pointless cases and lacking the superficial allure he sought. He showed no remorse, instead expressing relief that his secret was out, eagerly discussing his future with the other woman and dismissing Anna as unworthy. This betrayal, coupled with Ronan's cruel words, deeply hurt Anna but also sparked a transformation. Refusing to accept Ronan's narrative, Anna stood firm against his accusations and prepared to assert her worth and rights. Ronan's blatant disrespect and eagerness to end their marriage to pursue a life with his mistress only fueled Anna's determination. Despite the pain, she recognized this moment as an opportunity to reclaim her life and dignity. Anna's legal expertise became her greatest ally. She understood her rights and the implications of their shared assets, including Ronan's business. Ronan, underestimating Anna, expected a quick and favorable divorce for himself. However, Anna was prepared to fight for what was rightfully hers, leveraging her legal acumen to navigate the divorce proceedings. Throughout this ordeal, Anna remained composed and strategic. She moved out, asserting her independence and signaling to Ronan that she was no longer the woman he thought he could control. Ronan's attempts to belittle and intimidate Anna fell flat, as she countered every move with strength and intelligence. As the divorce process unfolded, Ronan's facade crumbled. His financial recklessness and overconfidence in his legal position left him vulnerable. Anna, on the other hand, emerged stronger, securing her rightful share of their assets and starting anew. Anna's story is not just about the end of a marriage, but about rebirth and empowerment. It's a testament to her resilience, intelligence, and the unyielding spirit of a woman who refused to be defined by another's betrayal. In reclaiming her life, Anna found a deeper sense of self-worth and the courage to pursue happiness on her own terms. As Anna faced the painful reality of her husband Ronan's betrayal, his words stung deeply. He proudly admitted his affair, diminishing the love and dedication Anna had given him for over a decade. Her heart broke as she questioned how he could disregard their shared life and the vows they had made. Ronan's harsh dismissal of their marriage and Anna's worth left her feeling worthless, as he bragged about his newfound success and diminished her achievements and appearance. Despite Ronan's cruelty, claiming he had moved on and decided on divorce, Anna was left to grapple with the shock and the delivery of divorce papers from a sympathetic friend. This moment, though heartbreaking, sparked a fierce determination within Anna. She resolved not to let this defeat her, but instead to stand up for herself and assert her rights, especially when she learned of a prenuptial agreement that entitled her to half of Ronan's business if he was unfaithful. With newfound resolve, Anna quickly moved out of what was once their shared home, reclaiming her independence and sending a clear message to Ronan that she was not to be underestimated. Despite Ronan's attempts to intimidate her with his lawyer's reputation, Anna remained steadfast, ready to fight for what she deserved. This story of betrayal turned into a tale of empowerment. Anna, once shattered by Ronan's betrayal, found strength in her resolve to not only move on, but to ensure justice was served. Through her journey, Anna demonstrated the power of resilience, the importance of standing up for oneself, and the ability to reclaim one's life after heartbreak. I've decided to bring my business to you, and that's a decision I'm sticking to for the time being. From now on, our interactions will be minimal, as I'm committed to maintaining my distance. I was mentally prepared to tackle any challenges that might come my way. From this point forward, I have no desire to have direct conversations with you. If you need to communicate, it will have to be through my attorneys. Additionally, I expect you to vacate my property. When Ronan made his demands, it ignited a deep fury within me. It's surprising how feelings of anger and resentment can strengthen one's resolve when confronted with such blatant disrespect. Suddenly, my thoughts became sharper, and I found myself nearly amused by Clark's naivety. He clearly underestimated who he was dealing with, and I doubted his lawyer Devin was any the wiser. I scheduled a meeting with Devin at a local cafe. Upon spotting me, Devin's initial reaction was one of nervousness, which only subsided when he recognized who I was. Although confident, Devin's assurance waned. He was competent, but hadn't expected to go up against someone of my caliber. Ronan had never viewed me as a formidable figure, so Devin was completely unprepared for our meeting. His anxiety was evident, his hands trembling, but I chose not to intimidate him further. After all, he wasn't the cause of my troubles. "Hello, Devin." "It's good to see you," I greeted him, noting his startled reaction. "If you're harboring any doubts, let me clarify them for you. Yes, I am the wife. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't expect you to be here," Devin stuttered, caught off guard by my presence. I went on to explain that our last names differed because I kept my maiden name for professional use after getting married. Devin seemed to relax slightly but was still uncomfortable. "So, I'm assuming you're looking to extend this legal battle." "That's what my client has informed me," he said cautiously. "Your client has been feeding you misinformation, Devin. It's him who's interested in dragging this case out, not me." "Didn't he mention that to you?" I challenged, letting my reputation as a seasoned lawyer do the talking. Devin fidgeted under my gaze. "I'm skilled in asking pointed questions," but I reassured him. "You don't need to respond, Devin. I've known Ronan for over a decade. I was married to that fool, after all. I understand his motives all too well." Feeling a bit sorry for Devin's situation, I chose to be forthcoming. "Since I know you and it doesn't seem fair to leave you in the dark, I'll share the real reason behind this divorce." "What do you mean, ma'am?" Devin asked, visibly confused. "Did my so-called husband bother to mention that he was unfaithful?" I revealed, opening up about the true nature of our dispute. I looked straight at Devin, my question hanging in the air, waiting for his reaction. His response was all I needed to confirm my doubts. Caught off guard by my disclosure, Devin's surprise was evident. Admitting to a colleague that I had been cheated on was not easy for me. It was a blow to my pride, and admittedly, it hurt. But I knew better than to show my emotions. Despite feeling humiliated, I reminded myself that I still held an advantage in this situation. Devin, seemingly unaware of my husband's deceit, replied, "Oh no, I wasn't informed about that. But he did caution me that you might come up with unfounded claims to tarnish his reputation." "Poor you, Devin," I said a bit sarcastically. "Your client has misled you. But perhaps you'd be pleased to hear that Clark regards you highly as a lawyer." "That's flattering, but I can't imagine being in your league," Devin admitted with a touch of humility. "I wish he had mentioned that his wife is also a lawyer. He only told me you worked at a law firm." My husband had always had a way of belittling my achievements and diminishing my influence. Staying with him for so long was my oversight. But fortunately, I had the foresight to sign a prenuptial agreement to protect myself. I shared this with Devin, who was visibly startled at the mention of a primp. The concept seemed unfamiliar to him, making it clear that Ronan had yet again left out crucial information, probably hoping I'd overlooked the agreement. Well, it doesn't matter now, I continued, seeing Devon's confusion. The cat's out of the bag about the primp. Devon, now completely bewildered, asked, "There's a primp involved?" "Your husband never mentioned that. Do you have any evidence?" "Indeed, I have more than enough proof," I reassured him, revealing that I had brought the necessary documents. I had anticipated Ronan's attempt to evade the repercussions of his actions. And don't worry about the proof of his affair. I've come prepared for that as well. It's not my intention to prolong this divorce. The sooner it's finalized, the better for everyone involved. This reassurance seemed to ease Devon's mind slightly, though he was clearly still processing the new information. "I would really appreciate a chance to review the documents, Mom. And any evidence of the affair would be crucial too." "Of course, Devon. Like I said, I've brought everything with me. We won't be dragging this out. It's in everyone's best interest to resolve this as quickly as possible." I calmly handed over every piece of evidence to Devon, ranging from messages and photographs to official documents, all neatly compiled and ready from my handbag. As I passed them over nonchalantly, I was confident about the strength of my case. Devon meticulously examined each piece of evidence, his expression growing increasingly solemn. Finally, he acknowledged the undeniable proof before him. "It's clear you have concrete evidence for everything, ma'am. This was all unknown to me until now." "I gathered as much," I responded. I also mentioned how challenging it must be to deal with clients who aren't forthcoming, especially when facing an opponent who is equally matched in legal prowess. Devon agreed, indicating the meeting had served its purpose and hinting at a need to reevaluate his stance on representing his client. He mentioned someone would get in touch with me, though he couldn't confirm it would be him, a hint I chose not to dwell on. After thanking him for his time, I left the cafe and headed straight to my office to further prepare for the divorce proceedings. Any sadness I had felt was replaced by a determined rage to ensure Ronan faced the consequences of his actions. True to the chaotic nature of our dispute, Clark called me directly the next day, despite explicit instructions to avoid personal contact. His tone was furious, a reaction I found both amusing and predictable. He demanded to know what I had said to his lawyer, accusing me of causing his resignation. I couldn't help but point out the irony of his call, considering his earlier demands for distance. Clark's frustration was palpable as he threatened to take away his family business, a claim I met with skepticism. I calmly informed him of my readiness to face whatever legal battle lay ahead, confident in my position and the evidence I had compiled. Clark's threats did little to intimidate me. Instead, they reinforced my resolve to see this through, secure in the knowledge that his actions had left him with limited options. Clark threatened to defeat me in court, confidently declaring I would beg him for mercy. I couldn't help but respond with a mix of amusement and advice. "Well, that sounds like a grand plan. Clark, good luck. But let me give you a friendly tip as a lawyer. Don't forget to inform your next lawyer about your affair and the prenuptial agreement." After my words, Anna simply ended the call, which only made me chuckle. He was in a dire situation, yet seemed blissfully unaware of the gravity of his predicament. He might search the city for a lawyer willing to take his case, but my reputation precedes me, making most think twice before crossing paths with me. Furthermore, anyone swayed by his narrative would soon face a harsh return to reality once I laid out my evidence. Clark's bold claim that he would make me plead for mercy only convinced me further that it would be him knocking on my door for forgiveness sooner rather than later. My prediction proved accurate when one morning, as I was preparing for work, I heard a knock at my door at an unusually early hour. To my surprise, it was Clark, looking defeated and exhausted. I let him in, preferring not to attract neighborhood attention to a potential spectacle. "Make this quick, Ronan. I don't have time to waste," I told him bluntly, wondering why he was here when our agreement was to communicate solely through our attorneys. "About that, I haven't found a good divorce lawyer yet," he admitted, sounding deflated. "That's unfortunate for you," I replied, not hiding my indifference. "You might want to speed up your search. I hear your mistress is quite eager." He attempted to change the subject, accusing me of sabotaging his attempts to find a lawyer, claiming it was unfair. I couldn't help but laugh at the accusation. It was astonishing that Clark would blame me for his own failures, underestimating my professionalism and overestimating his influence. "Oh, Ronan, that's quite the accusation. Let me clear up that misunderstanding for you," I said, ready to confront his baseless claims with the truth. "I haven't been undermining you in any way, Ronan. The problems you're facing are entirely of your own making. When you asked in disbelief what you did wrong, it made me wonder if you genuinely didn't see the issues with your actions. Should I remind you of the lies you've told your lawyers about your affair and the primp? Misleading them only sets them up for embarrassment in court. It's naive to think any reputable lawyer would eagerly represent someone as unreliable as you. And yes, my reputation in the field does make people think twice before going against me. You might think little of me, but I have established a respectable standing in our profession." Hearing this, Ronan admitted, "I realize that now, Sophia. I've tried to be honest with other lawyers, but none seem willing to take my case. That's the consequence of trying to challenge a solid prenup and not thinking your affair through properly. The damage is already done, and no sensible lawyer would support your cause. You're essentially asking to hand over half of your business to me," I pointed out, noting the dread on Clark's face at the thought of losing his business. He had hoped to find a competent lawyer who could delay the divorce, keeping me in limbo until I would give up and leave without claiming my share of his company. However, as the reality set in that no lawyer would side with him, and finding anyone willing to confront me was proving futile, he resorted to his last option. He began to cry and plead. "Anna, you know how much the business means to me. Please, I beg you, take everything else but leave the business intact." "Why should I, Clark? You included the clause about splitting the business if you were unfaithful. Did you think I'd just relinquish my rights after your betrayal?" "I deserve what's rightfully mine," I retorted. He tried to appeal to me by admitting his mistake and suggesting we give our marriage another chance, claiming the ordeal could strengthen our bond. His plea only elicited laughter from me. The sheer nerve of him to think I might consider reconciling after everything was astonishing. I was aware of his paused affair and the rumors of discontent between him and his mistress. But his misguided belief that this might sway me to return was utterly mistaken. I had already learned my lesson the hard way by marrying him once. My resolve was firm, and there was no turning back from the decision to move forward without him, knowing well the worth of my dignity and the strength of my case. Clark's sudden desperation to reconcile seemed utterly irrational. Thinking we can simply overlook your actions and start over as if nothing happened is delusional, Clark. I've not made it this far in life by being naive. It's clear to me now, your urge to reconcile isn't rooted in lost love, but in the fear of losing half your business. Anna, we were happy once. Can't we try to move past this mistake and begin anew? I promise. The other woman is out of the picture for good, he pleaded. There's no need for promises, Clark. That woman will likely leave on her own once she realizes the financial aftermath of our divorce for you. As for me, this situation has been an enlightening escape from our farcical marriage. I should be thanking you for revealing your true self before our lives became more entangled with children. Now, you'll face the consequences of your actions. That was the last of what I had to say to him. Ronan continued to plead, begging me not to dismantle his business. His desperation was pitiful, yet it didn't sway me in the slightest. Instead, it reminded me of the countless nights I cried myself to sleep over the betrayal of the man I once called my husband. Witnessing his downfall was a bitter form of satisfaction, marking the end of my quest for vengeance. What I needed now was a fresh start, a clean break from this chaos. The karmic backlash against Clark was swift and severe. He spent weeks attempting to persuade me to return, but I ignored every attempt. My focus was on moving forward, especially since the divorce proceedings were already in motion. I appointed a colleague from my law firm to represent me, as I wasn't a divorce lawyer myself. Moreover, I sought to keep our interactions to an absolute minimum. After a month of futile efforts, Clark finally conceded and sought a lawyer, aiming for a straightforward separation. He knew that dragging this through the courts would only amplify his embarrassment and drain his resources on court-appointed attorneys. In the end, he chose to retreat, a decision that underscored the inevitability of our parting ways. Following the prenuptial agreement, referred to here as primp, securing the divorce was straightforward for me, especially armed with ample evidence of Ronan's infidelity. According to the terms, Ronan was obligated to forfeit half of his business to me. Despite his displeasure, he found himself cornered with no alternative but to comply. We even presented him with the option to buy out my share, but his finances were in shambles. You might wonder how Ronan, a supposedly successful business owner, ended up penniless. The answer lies in his extravagant spending on his mistress, who, upon realizing the forthcoming dent in Ronan's wealth, ceased all communication with him. It seemed she had no interest in a partner without deep pockets, and soon her reputation deterred others from pursuing her, a fitting twist of karma. With half of his business now out of his hands, Ronan faced a significant dip in his income. The financial strain forced him to sell his house, as he could no longer afford its upkeep or mortgage. He's now living in a condo, a stark contrast to his previous luxurious residence. Desperate to regain his former financial status, he even attempted reconciliation with me, hoping to consolidate his business once more. Needless to say, his efforts were in vain. As for me, life has been flourishing. I've delegated the management of my portion of Ronan's business to a competent individual, and the returns have been exceedingly beneficial. The additional income has allowed me to elevate my lifestyle, culminating in the purchase of a new mansion. Between my legal career and business ventures, I'm thriving, enjoying the rewards of my endeavors. The outcome of the divorce has been immensely favorable for me. Instead of being victimized by my ex-husband and his mistress, their schemes backfired, improving my life substantially while leaving them to grapple with the consequences of their actions. In the end, I emerged stronger and more successful, fully embracing a future filled with promise and prosperity.